Okay, so moving on to our second news story, or stories actually. I've squashed two together for this segment, and this is to do with it seems to have been the month for finding strange animals, curious uses of biodiversity and zoo archaeology. So the first one actually comes from Jersey, and there's a Guernsey, Guernsey, not Jersey, where the headline that caught my eye was "Medieval Porpoise Burial Surprises Archaeologists."
They couldn't work out what porpoise it was buried for.
Exactly, and I was getting all sorts of hilarious wordplay when I shared this one. Archaeologists have been digging on Chapelle d'Homme off Perel for the last 3 weeks and uncovered what they believe are the ruins of a religious retreat. Okay, so we have the context, religious retreat. But the strangest discovery was made in the final few days of the dig at the northern end of a trench, when as they reached the medieval layer, there was not a human body that they found, but rather the skull of a medieval sea creature was uncovered, followed by the rest of its skeleton. The Dr. De Jersey, so there is a Jersey involved, said, "If we were in a church and we found something like this based on the shape, we would think that it was a grave cut," he said. "This is what puzzles me. If they had eaten or killed it for the blubber, why take the trouble to bury it?" Do you have any pet theories on this sort of thing? Why do people do things with animals?
I'm really fishing around to come up with an answer to this, especially as I'm not a zoo archaeologist.
Yeah. You've just got to tune yourself in. That's all.
Absolutely. I could come up with some cod theory or other, but I'm really not going to. I think we ought to finish this perhaps before we get even deeper into the hole that we've dug ourselves. But no, in all seriousness, it's a great. First of all, it's a great find. The story that broke, I think most of the shares I've seen come from an article in the Guardian in the UK, and it seems to have really caught people's imagination. Hardly surprising, because it is a fascinating find for whatever reason. It opens us up to the old archaeological joke that, if you don't know what something is, it's ritual. On the other hand, the excavator himself says that it could have been buried and it could have been being salted to preserve the flesh for food.
Could have been tried to salt it. It might have been a corpse that had gone particularly bad, and they just thought, bury it, get rid of it, kind of thing.
Except that the site's only a few metres from the scene. You can just chuck it in and let the sea deal with it. It's that's why it's so fascinating. I think nobody knows.
No,
and actually, once all the forensics have been done, all the analysis has been done, we might still not know. It might all just be speculation, and which is one of those wonderful mysteries of the past that we live with all the time and makes what we do so much fun.
Well, that's the thing. I think we're almost guaranteed to never know in this case. But that said, there are. In terms of medieval Christianity, I'll just put some sort of attempt out there to talk about this. There is an awful lot of links with fish, and also the remains of fish, and also actually shells as well. So, for example, in early Saxon graveyards, sometimes you find graves that are lined with white shells, this kind of thing, and items coming from the sea, whether it's to do with possibly a direct link with the idea of the gospel and people being the fishers of men, supposedly, this kind of thing, or if it's something a bit more esoteric, like possibly sometimes the church would fold in local beliefs about, for example, the water being the underworld and this kind of thing. So there could be almost anything going on. But in terms of as you say, there's this thing that I can't stand, where people make the joke of, don't know what it is, must be ritual, and I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true anymore. I think for the most part, archaeologists are quite good at saying we don't know what this is. And actually, to be fair, in this this is from the Guernsey Press. But in this article, he doesn't say anything about ritual. He just says, why take the trouble to bury it? So he's asking the question, and also, frankly, actually, that's where the article ends. So essentially, he's leaving it open to the public to discuss, which I think is one of the reasons, as we've talked about in the past, that archaeology is so accessible. It's one of those sciences that people can in fact, be armchairs, archaeologists. But this story comes in conjunction, though, with this month with another story from Jerusalem, where a 4,000-year-old jar has been discovered in a burial, and this jar contains the remains of headless toads. I was just wondering if there's a number here. It's part of 60 rock-cut tombs, and they reckon it could be a food offering, but ultimately the headlessness of the toads is kind of freaking people out. And undoubtedly, this is one where you are so immensely tempted to say that has to be ritual, surely. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I went back to the ground zero of the story, which is a press release from the Israeli Antiquities Authority, which puts the find in its context within the excavation. There's some very interesting photographs, and they say that again, this is a very new find. It's going to be discussed at a conference that's coming up, but it's really in very early stages of its analysis and attempts to understand it. They also point out that the same tomb, which dates from, as you say, the Canaanite period, which is around about 2000 BCE, contained evidence of the cultivation of date palms and myrtle, which aren't indigenous plants to the area where the tomb was situated. So there's more to it than just the headless toads. That's and they don't they're quite open about that. It's an interesting find. It was an unexpected find. They don't know what's going on. What's interesting is that certainly one of the comments I've seen on another site that covered the story, somebody immediately made the connection: toads, glands, hallucinogenic. It's drugs. That they were toad licking. The Canaanites were toad licking and to create a trip when they're carrying out the funeral rituals. So the process of adopting the story into the folklore and into the archaeological lore has already begun.
Yeah. Well, and another suggestion here is that one way to prepare a toad for eating is to remove its head and the edges of the limbs, so that the sometimes toxic skin could be removed. So it could actually be the exact opposite of the drugs. They could actually be trying to avoid the druggishness.
Exactly, and the broader context. Again, if you read the IAA's press release, the whole context of the find is in grave goods, their grave offerings, where the deceased would be left with a meal to see them see them through the afterlife. So that works in that context too. And I think we have to say when we're looking at this, we're not dealing with something that is just unusual animal offerings. Burials like this don't just happen in the medieval, don't just happen in ancient Canaan, Israel, Palestine. When I was prepping this after we decided we were going to put it into the agenda for this month's watching brief, I found a report from Wessex Archaeology in the UK. And this is a site at Queen Mary's Hospital at Carshalton in Surrey. And it says the single fill of one early Romano-British pit contained the butchered partial carcasses of 20 to 30 animals, predominantly sheep, goat, but also 2 dogs, a perinatal horse, 2 domestic fowl, and a raven.
Oh, okay.
Now, and there were also a number of dog burials in that area, which are well known. And anybody who visits the Museum of Egyptian Antiquities will have seen the mummified cats, mummified ibis, mummified crocodiles. We're dealing with something that's almost a universal in religious lore.
Well, it's funny actually, because that list you just rattled off sounds like the contents of a children's song, doesn't it? It's fantastic. But they absolutely, and actually, it's interesting. I think what I'm intrigued by here is, so the porpoise story with these toads in jars. It's interesting how, as you say, in other contexts, especially where there's large scale animal remains deposition, it's somehow it's more easily accepted, or more rather, so I suppose it comes as part of the site, the story of the site, if you see what I mean. Whereas I think if you find individual creatures or an individual find where creatures have been handled in a very particular way, for some reason it gets people's hair. It is, their ears prick up and they go, what could that be? And so on the one hand, I'm sort of thinking, does this really, or both of these stories, to sort of highlight what people and animals have always been using animals in interesting ways, especially in burial contexts. But I think also it possibly highlights the way that in some respects is the exact that's the exact nature of the power of the act. Is that when you find, for example, a horse's head at the bottom of a grave, of a grave or something, you often hear people very viscerally reacting to that, because in some respects, a mass slaughter is almost like something that happens on a farm, but where when you find these quirky little treatments of animals, that there's something, and it's not literally magical, but it makes you slightly fearful. It makes you curious. It makes you want to know what on earth happened, and therefore you want to be. It's all about hidden knowledge and the exact nature of the ritual would be essentially differentiating the people who do the ritual from those who don't, and you feel as though you're one of those who don't know what happened, so you want to be in there. You want to know what's going on. Do you see what I mean? It's all about the interplay that we write and read so much about when it comes to especially prehistory and prehistoric monuments, this kind of thing.
Absolutely. I think when we have no written records, we have no written description. We go to the Viking period, where in Scandinavia, where we know the Northern European Iron Age, we know that there are sacrificial burials, and certainly high status individuals might be sacrificed with both human servants, reportedly, but also certainly dogs, ponies, other animals who will be part of their entourage in this life, and it's assumed they're wanting to go to the next, to serve them in the next as well. So there's a sense that it's about continuity. It's about when somebody stands on the threshold of Valhalla or whatever, they've got the right entourage to enter with. And we see that in other cultures and other periods in history as well. I mean, I think in the end, what this comes down to is two things. First of all, our relationship with animals in particular is a very complex one, and it varies from time to time and from culture to culture. We're sat here in a Western European context where I know you have a pet dog. We've got a pet dog. Wouldn't dream of turning him into a sacrifice. But
I don't know. Sometimes
others, that would be the ultimate. That would be it would be a hugely respectful thing to do. So it's just one of those things. And I think at an even deeper level, I think it like the porpoise story, it just shows really again that the past, those people in the past, they're not like us. They might look like us, but their brains don't think in the same way that ours did. We're all human beings, but our cultural lives and our spiritual lives have changed and developed, and there's a huge amount of variety, a huge amount of difference, and many things that we will actually never know. But we can look at and investigate and make a best guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can certainly enjoy talking about it, definitely. And I think, as I say, I mean, obviously, I was joking, but sometimes I do wonder whether a good animal sacrifice might help the weather, but we've never gone through with it. Okay. Anyway, I'll
come back to that. I'll come back to that at the end when we talk about our media picks.
Indeed. But no, I think I just wanted to highlight these stories this month, because they did seem to come back to back, and it's always. Again, it's a very quick way to highlight to people that the past is a foreign landscape, a foreign world. Definitely. And
I think I'd certainly like to invite any of our archaeozoologist or folklorist viewers who are out there to please comment on this conversation below, because, as I say, in terms of expertise, this isn't my comfort zone. And but at a human level, I'm intrigued by it. So, what do you think?
Exactly.